My 60 Years on the Plains, Chapter 13. In the early spring, a trapper named Duranger, who had formerly been with the Hudson Bay Company, reached the rendezvous. He'd come from the Walla Walla country and reported that the streams flowing from the Blue Mountains contained large quantities of beaver. About the same time, March 15, Kentuck returned accompanied by 10 trappers from St. Louis. They brought all the late papers. 5 days later, Williams arrived from Santa Fe, and a council was held to select some new field for collecting furs. Williams said that he had many times contemplated a visit to the country described by Duranger, and he made a proposition that as the year was 1843, we should form a company of 43 men and make all preparations for a 2 years trip. This was agreed upon, and the trip lasted a little over 2 years. Williams, Perkins, and I packed 5 horses with Indian goods, and the expedition started on the 25th of March with everything in prime condition. We traveled to Snake River and thence to Blackfoot River, where we met a Bannock village of whose chief, Tygie, so much has been written. He was acquainted with many in our outfit and was friendly. We traded with him for a few furs. Our outfit consisted of 4 different parties who collected furs in common. That is, each one had an equal share in all furs caught by their own party. We had 13 in our mess. An unlucky number, you'll say, but in this instance, it proved quite the reverse. For mutual protection, we always pitched our tents and lodges together. Each mess was furnished its quota of guards. Before proceeding further, it will be necessary to explain about the northern Indians who were so troublesome to the old-time trappers. 3 tribes, Blackfoot, Bloods, and Piegans, make up what has always been known as the Blackfoot Nation. The Piegan and Blood Indians claimed and occupied the country from the British line 49 degrees north latitude to the Musselshell River on the south, and west along the summit of the Rocky Mountains to a range enclosing what is now known as Prickly Pear Valley, where Helena, Montana is now. This represented a large area and was commonly called Blackfoot country. In the aggregate, these Indians were numerous, and they were constantly on the warpath against all other Indians and whites. The 3rd branch of the Blackfeet resided in and claimed the country from the British line to Fort Edmonton on the Saskatchewan River. Hence, when a war party of these northern Indians were met with, they were pronounced Blackfeet. Many people, even to this day, believe the Comanches to be a tribe distinct from others. It is not so, for they belong to the Shoshone family, as do also the Utahs, Paiutes, and Waterrickers, who principally lived on the Great American Desert or its border. It must not be thought that trappers are an idle set while at the rendezvous. The reverse is true. Many of them are constantly dressing buckskin, and their mode of dressing is far superior to that of the Indians, as the skin, when prepared by them, will not stretch nor shrink when wet. Others are hunting deer to keep the camp supplied with meat, or putting arms and traps in perfect condition. Most trappers make their own buckskin clothes, although there were 2 tailors at Brown's Hole. Tygie, maybe Tygie, told us that there were 2 parties of Hudson Bay trappers on these streams near his village, and that another party had gone up Snake River. We held a council and decided to take the Boise River Trail, perhaps, as the Hudson Bay Company had a trading post in that section. We hurried along and reached the post with a few furs which we traded to a gentlemanly old Scotchman who was in charge. He bought my pinto pony, paying me $50 in cash. He told us that there were no trapping outfits in the Blue Mountains nor on the streams, but that the Howlak band of Bannocks were camped on Camas Prairie. This is known today as Grand Ronde Valley in Oregon. This band of Bannocks were not inclined to be friendly, and he advised us to cross the mountains to Walla Walla on the north side. This we did not care to do, as the streams between the post and Camas Prairie were full of beaver. We trapped all of them, and it was not until we reached Camas Prairie that we came in contact with the Bannocks. Here we ran on to their village of 100 lodges. The chief met us with a strong escort of painted and feathered warriors and commanded us to halt. This we did, not at his pleasure, but at our own. He asked us in signs what we were doing in his country, and in an insulting manner demanded several ponies. He also ordered us to unpack our goods, as he wished to see what we had. These demands we ignored. The Bannocks were well up in sign language, and most of the chief's speech was understood by our men, all of it by myself. The chief was given to understand that he would not receive ponies and that we would not unpack. If he wished to smoke and be friends, good. If not, he must get out of our way, as we were going on, and we claimed the right to trap in all streams, either in the mountains or on the plains. When the chief heard this, he appeared to be thunderstruck. The Bannocks had a great many Hudson Bay flintlocks, bows and arrows, and a few lances, mostly carried for ornament, but used also to spear a fallen foe. Our men were becoming impatient and would have opened fight then and there had not Williams, who had been chosen leader, restrained them. The chief saw the action of our men and realized that he stood on delicate ground. He withdrew in a threatening manner, but it was plain to all that we would see more of these Bannocks. Heretofore they had stripped and robbed many small trapping outfits, but ours was the first large company that had traveled through that country. We passed by the village and continued some 12 miles, camping in a commanding position on a cottonwood creek. We built corrals and dug rifle pits, as we felt positive that the Howlack would resent what he considered an insult by following us with a strong war party. All our band were old mountain veterans, with the exception of George, Howard, and myself. Howard was a brother of Kentuck and was over 6 feet tall. A few traps were set, but not far from camp. Pickets kept a sharp lookout, and at sunset discovered a few Indians at a distance. They were locating our camp, and sure indication that mischief was intended. Had Howlack seen the preparations we made to receive him, he would have hesitated before attacking us. All our war horses were saddled with pads. In fact, they were always saddled in readiness, but were never mounted except in case of emergency. 6 men at a time stood guard, with 3 hours relief. At about 4 o'clock in the morning, the guards fired several shots at wolves prowling in close vicinity to camp. 2 of the wolves were shot in the head and proved to be Bannocks. Other wolves were seen departing. Indians are very expert at this, imitating the actions of wolves. Putting a large wolf hide on their backs and creeping on their hands and knees, they imitate the wolf very closely. I have to reread some of this. But mountain men are up to all such strategy, and many an Indian has come to grief while trying the game on trappers. These warriors had been sent by the chief to ascertain the exact strength of our camp before he attacked in force. When the guards shot, the rest of the men were all asleep with arms by their sides ready for instant action. Before the smoke had cleared from the rifles, all of us were at the breastwork. For some time, nothing more was seen of the Bannocks. We were certain that the guards had made no mistake, for they dragged in 2 Indians who had played wolf and lifted top knots, as Kentuck said. The chief must have been waiting for these 2 men to return and report, although by this time he must have concluded they were either killed or wounded. Just at daylight, a strong force of mounted warriors was seen approaching. When at about 300 yards from camp, they halted and held a consultation. We estimated that the Indians numbered 300. After a little, About one half of them dismounted and made a flank movement, crossing the creek so as to attack us from two sides. On the creek side, opposite camp, was an open country, and we were well fortified. Williams detailed 10 men to watch this side and arranged so that they could be reinforced in a moment if necessary. Strict orders were given to make every shot count. It demoralizes Indians when they see their comrades fall. A few determined men can stand off a great many Indians. As soon as the foot Indians reached the opposite side of the creek, they opened fire. Immediately, the mounted Indians with yells and war whoops began the charge. We held our fire until the enemy were within 75 yards and then opened up. Almost every shot counted. Many Indians fell from their horses, and ponies fell pinning their riders. Then 7 double-barrel shotguns poured in their fire on the Indians who had halted and were somewhat clustered. The shots created havoc, and with a yell as of despair, they fell back, leaving many wounded. 33 of our men mounted their war horses and charged, but the Indians were excited and bewildered and broke for cover. Our men with their deadly Colts told with terrible effect. We kept up the chase for about a mile, losing one man, a Virginian named Albert Smith, a brave man in every respect, and one whom we could ill afford to lose. We captured 60 ponies and many flintlock guns. Each trapper had one scalp and some two, but they were dearly bought. Of our men, 1 was dead and there were 11 wounded, 4 seriously, but all recovered. Perkins' favorite horse had a broken leg and had to be shot. My horse was shot in the fleshy part of the thigh, but the wound did not interfere with his part in the action. Many of the trappers' horses had wounds. I have been in many an Indian charge since this one, but I have never been in one that was so savagely executed. What made this one so bitter was that when Howlack went from our meeting on Camas Prairie, he said in signs, "You white dogs, I will wipe you out." As soon as the Indians who had attacked from the creek side saw the tide of battle sweep away from their companions, they left their position, leaving 11 wounded. We buried Smith in one of our rifle pits so that the Indians should not find him. They will dig down 10 feet to get a white man's scalp. We fooled them this time, for they never discovered Smith's body. I saw Halleck in the lead of the retreating Bannocks and told Williams that I thought my horse could catch his, but he said to let him go. This was the same band of Bannocks who a few years later annoyed the immigrants in Oregon. It was an unfriendly tribe and is not to be trusted even today. End of chapter 13.